and engages his whole time in glorifying the Lord by the process of kirtan. Such a preaching process is transcendental to all material qualities. Such a preaching process is transcendental to all material qualities. Such a preaching process is transcendental to all material qualities. Text number 22. Are you ready?
Yes.
You sure?
Yes.
O virtuous one, you have only once seen my person, and this is just to increase your desire for me. O virtuous one, you have only once seen my person, and this is just to increase your desire for me, because the more you hanker for me, the more you will be freed from all material desires. Purport. A living being cannot be vacant of desires. He is not a dead stone. He must be working, thinking, feeling, and willing. But when he thinks, feels, and wills materially, he becomes entangled, and conversely, when he thinks, feels, and wills for the service of the Lord, he becomes gradually freed from all entanglement. The more a person is entangled in the transcendental loving service of the Lord, the more he acquires a hankering for it. You see kind of the poetry here? The juxtaposition of talking about material entanglement, and it says, and this is a focal point for the process of bhakti over all of the processes in this statement. The more a person is entangled, is that interesting use of the word because it's usually pejorative, isn't it? We say, oh, I'm entangled. But in devotional service, we talk about the importance of becoming entangled. Unless you're entangled in devotional service, then by default, you'll be entangled elsewhere. It's what Krishna tells Arjuna as far as dharma goes. If you don't follow your dharma and fight, even though it seems to be faulty, you're going to end up fighting somewhere else anyway, because that's how you'll be compelled by your nature. And the only way to become free from one's material nature is to become entangled spiritually. So much so that even on an introductory level, there's a way in which one becomes so absorbed in one's service, not even talking about entanglement in emotional affairs of the spiritual world, although that will come. In the beginning, one's senses must be engaged. Sarvapati vinirmuktam taprat veda nirmalam rishikena rishikesha. We're using our senses in service of the master of the senses. And in the beginning, we're so engaged that we hardly have time for Maya. In fact, that's the best form of detachment, is have somewhere better to go at the time. So it may even sound interesting when somebody suggests, how about this kind of sense gratification? And you say, yeah, sounds great, but I have to finish my devotional service. And you never come to the end of it. And you can play out your whole life like that and stay engaged, stay entangled in devotional service. You have duties to do until the game is over. The more a person is entangled in the transcendental loving service of the Lord, the more he acquires a hankering for it. That is the transcendental nature of godly service. Material service has satiation, whereas spiritual service of the Lord has neither satiation nor end. One could go on increasing his anchorings for the loving transcendental service of the Lord, and yet he will not find satiation or end. By intense service of the Lord, one can experience the presence of the Lord transcendentally. Therefore, seeing the Lord means being engaged in his service, because his service and his person are identical. I'll repeat. Therefore, seeing the Lord means being engaged in his service, because his service and his person are identical. Mic drop. Mic drop moment. I can't drop it, it's on the stand. The sincere devotee should go on with sincere service of the Lord. The Lord will give proper direction as to how and where it has to be done. There was no material desire in Narada, and yet, just to increase his intense desire for the Lord, he was so advised. So what's happening here? Anybody want to summarize? Yes, go ahead, Shukra.
There's this one verse. I forgot what the verse was in the 5th canto. Satyam Vishati something.
Satyam Vishati Artitam Artitam Rinam Naivartitoya Puna Artitolita Sayam Vidite Artitam Nichitam Cha Dharanam Vijakada.
Thank you so much. So in that verse, Krishna satisfies someone's material desires in a way that if you perform devotional service, Krishna satisfies your desires and your material desires in a way that you get less of those material desires. And so, and that just hit me when reading this purport, because I really like the word entanglement, being spiritually entangled rather than materially entangled. It feels so nice to be spiritually entangled.
It seems natural, doesn't it? The idea of renunciation, stark renunciation, militantly pulling your senses away and being averse to the material world seems so unnatural, because the material world is a reflection of the spiritual world, and it's also Krishna. And to be averse to it is unnatural. However, if we become entangled in service and we see everything in the universe as paraphernalia to be used in the service of the Lord, then it's like a snake with no teeth. You know a snake with no teeth? Do you? You ever met one?
No.
Go like this. It looks kind of dangerous, but it can't bite you. And in fact, that was the situation of Jamil, as described by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur in the 6th canto of Srimad Bhagvatam. He chanted D-9, and he was calling his son. But Krishna took it as a cause to ignite a fire that burned up all his prarabdha karma. Aparoda palam papam kutam bijam palodukam karmainaiva prabhyante Vishnu bhaktiratmanam. Padma Purana, quoted by Srila Rupa Goswami in his Bhakti-rasamrita Sindhu, says that when you take to Vishnu Bhakti, especially this Hare Krishna, then all of the karma is kramayanaiva praliyate. It's destroyed. And what kind of karma? Aparabdha, that which isn't even manifested yet. And the aparabdha palam papam, the sins that are manifested, kutam bijam palomukam, it's the various stages of the seed growing, and all those are destroyed. And there's a way in which it's done apparently kramayanaiva, step by step. However, the acharyas commenting on this, the devotion charge means Krishna Chakravarti Thakur, Srila Jiva Goswami give the example of a stringing a garland with of a lotus. You have 1,000 lotus petals, getting ready to put a needle through it. And so you can say it's step by step, because the needle goes through each petal at a time. But practically speaking, you just put it through. And in a similar way, practice of devotional service destroys all the previous karmas. And then says Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur in an internal dialogue, well, why did Ajamil go on apparently sinning even after he chanted the holy name of the Lord and he was absolved from sins? And Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, yeah, just by some momentum, but by that time, his engagement with the material world was like a snake with no teeth. And if you go on Parikram, you'll meet these kids that come up to you with a basket. Come up to you with a basket, and they come up close to you, and then they open the basket, and there's a cobra inside, and you go, ah! Those cobras don't have any teeth. And so, yes, you were going to make a point. Right, Carl.
I was very interested by this sentence here. Material service has satiation, whereas spiritual service of the Lord has neither satiation nor end. One can go on increasing his hankerings for the loving, transcendental service of the Lord, yet he will not find satiation or end. I see sometimes in life, when we are doing our daily services, we see some devotees say that when we walk around, they're like, oh, I'm fried with my service, or I'm getting tired, I'm overburdened with service. Is that necessarily, is it because the service is not on the loving transcendental platform? Or on the other side, is it because of his getting more entangled in the loving service of the Lord?
It's awkward. Life is awkward. Get used to it. And we're always adjusting. So when we're at a particular stage of our practice in devotional service, life may seem hard to balance, and therefore awkward, which is a weird word, even still weird, but A-W-K, W-A-R, a lot of W's in there. And that's how life is in the material world, because we're assaulted by our senses practically at every moment, and the bad masters of our senses are used to pushing us around. And what is that called? Stockholm Syndrome? You ever heard of that? Stockholm Syndrome? So the people were kidnapped, and then they were held hostage for a long period of time, but then they fell in love with their captors. And they thought, when they were rescued, no, we want to die with our abductors. And the social scientists, psychologists had studied this idea. Why did you want to be there with people who took away your freedom? And it's a psychological anomaly. And the conditioned soul has that too. We get attached to our captors, the senses, and have a perverse relationship with them. So then when we try for freedom, there's this struggle that goes on. And it also may have to do with finding balance in our practice of devotional service, which takes some time. Just because we don't have balance doesn't mean we should stop our service either. Because as we go on, we gradually refine things, and we should endeavor for that, to find a happy medium so we can go on with our service for a long period of time and not burn out. There is a way in which, in ISKCON, if you can show your mental or physical prowess one way or another, everyone will walk up to you and say, hey, why don't you come to do some service over here? Not many people say, how engaged are you? Are you at 30%, 60%, 90%? They just say, can you do it for us too? And next thing you know, if you have a hero complex where you think, yeah, let me fix everybody's problems, and I'm so great anyway, no wonder they want me. And next thing you know, you're at 110%, and you rise to the level of your own incompetence. And then you may feel a little fried, because the feeling of being fried is that I want to please everybody, and then they start saying, well, how come you didn't show up? And you didn't finish it on time, and so forth, and how could you have? You're at 110%. Therefore, it's recommended. Rupa Goswami recommends that we find a way in which we can be steadily engaged in devotional service without over-endeavoring. And Prabhupada gives examples in his purport to that admonition that you may take up a huge project, for instance, building a temple. Only people with certain kind of acumen for moving material energy around can do that kind of stuff. Even then, it's a little dicey. And if you're ordered to do it, then you can do it. But if you just get into a lot of that stuff, the next thing you know, you're always answering phone calls and you don't have enough time for your sadhana and so forth, you may find yourself a little out of balance. So it's good to have mentors, sadhus who will say, maybe you should think about taking a little break and chanting some more. I was getting more and more service. I was 1 year in Govardhan, and an older godbrother I was talking to, he said, you're getting more and more service, so you might want to think about spending more time in the Dham. Sounds counterintuitive, right? But then the logic of it is that in order to handle more service, you should have an equal contribution to your increased sadhana to be able to maintain it so it doesn't become entangling in the wrong way. That was a long answer, yes.
Hare Krishna. There is a statement that Keshav Maharaj often shares that I find.
That who?
Bhagavan Keshav Maharaj.
Keshav Maharaj, yeah.
That is quite relevant to this. He says that we should find an intensity that suits our personality so that we can maintain consistency that will awaken purity.
Wow. That's a really nice mantra. Thank you. I could have just said that. Okay, let's keep going. Material service has satiation, whereas spiritual service of the Lord has neither satiation nor end. Is this where we are? We finished. Thank you. We're up to 23. By service of the Absolute Truth, even for a few days, a devotee attains firm and fixed intelligence in me. Consequently, he goes on to become an associate in the transcendental world after giving up the present deplorable material worlds. Serving the Absolute Truth means rendering service unto the Absolute Personality of God under the direction of the bona fide spiritual master, who is a transparent via medium between the Lord and the neophyte devotee. The neophyte devotee has no ability to approach the Absolute Personality of Godhead by the strength of his present imperfect material senses, and therefore under the direction of the spiritual master he is trained in transcendental service of the Lord. And by such training, even for some days, the neophyte devotee gets intelligence in such transcendental service, which leads him ultimately to get free from perpetual inhabitation in the material worlds and to be promoted to the transcendental world to become one of the liberated associates of the Lord in the kingdom of God. Scanning me out. Questions or reflections before I begin? No, let's double that. 24. Intelligence engaged in my devotion cannot be thwarted at any time. Even at the time of creation, as well as the time of annihilation, your remembrance will continue by my mercy. Devotional service rendered to the personality of Godhead never goes in vain, since the personality of Godhead is eternal. Intelligence applied in his service or anything done in his relation is also permanent. In the Bhagavad Gita it is said that such transcendental service rendered unto the personality of Godhead accumulates birth after birth, and when the devotee is fully matured, the total service counted together makes him eligible to enter into the association of the personality of Godhead. Such accumulation of God's service is never vanquished, but increases until fully matured. You may remember in the beginning of our Yatra, I was using the metaphor of investment, and this is a similar idea about the accumulation of bhakti and mukti sukriti, or more and more qualification. It's to a person who's used to this idea in the material world, whoever accumulates the most wins. It's also understandable. And there are crossovers. For instance, in the Bhagavatam, there's a verse which says that just as a miser collects money and then counts it over and over again, look over, see how many coins do I have now? How much has it increased? So he said similarly, the devotee should think about his or her devotional practice as an accumulation and counting. How much do I have now? What services have I done? In fact, the verse says, it talks about how many verses one's accumulated and so forth.
I think
So
it's
this-
names.
Pardon me?
I think it's names.
How many names?
Yeah, names of Krishna.
And so that there's this parallel sense of entanglement by the miser in material wealth and the devotee in developing a devotional portfolio. What's in your portfolio when you die is Prabhupada's intimation here that, okay, let's see what you got. A little interview at the time of death. Pull out your portfolio and Vayura Nilamamritam, Atena Mashmantam Shariram, Om Kratosmara Kratosmara. Kratosmara Kratosmara. Let this temporary body be burned to ashes, let the air of life be merged with the totality of air. Now, my Lord, please remember all my sacrifices, and because you are the ultimate beneficiary, please remember all I've done for you. And then, in the purport, Prabhupada said, oh, you don't have to remind Krishna, he knows. He's keeping track. And in the 6th canto of the Bhagvatam, is mentioned there that everything's recorded and counted. Everything you do is devotional service. So there's this way in which if we become concerned with how our portfolio is doing, how we can develop it, this is a kind of track we can be on while we have breath in our body to be proactive and stay engaged in various kinds of services to please the Lord and have something to offer Him, some spiritual credits that we have that can all be, as Prabhupada says here, it accumulates birth after birth, and when a devotee is fully matured, total service counted together makes him eligible to enter into the association of personality of Godhead. So that's a helpful way to think about this lifetime as an opportunity to accumulate enough to develop such a portfolio that you'll be able to transfer to a better school. Like you've done already. And this idea, you're in, with you guys probably in kindergarten, you were thinking like, how can I get all A's or in finger painting so I can get a better situation in 1st grade, and then all the way through there, all the way up, and there's in your junior year, anyway, all that stuff that applies in the material world, it applies in the spiritual world also. Okay, so 25. Then, that supreme authority, personified by sound and unseen by eyes, but most wonderful, stopped speaking. Feeling a sense of gratitude, I offered my obeisances unto him, bowing my head. Purport that the personality of Godhead was not seen, but only heard, does not make any difference. The personality of Godhead produced the 4 Vedas by his breathing, and he is seen and realized through the transcendental sound of the Vedas. Similarly, the Bhagavad Gita is the sound representation of the Lord. The Bhagavad Gita is the sound representation of the Lord, and there is no difference in identity. The conclusion is that the Lord can be seen and heard by persistent chanting of the transcendental sound. Oftentimes I think of a hologram when, through technology, you perceive a person in all his or her dimensions, appears in the room. I haven't seen one lately, but I remember the early technology in Disneyland when I was a kid, and there would be a personality like Abe Lincoln or something would stand up and be personally present there, and you'd feel this visceral sense that, oh my God, here he is right here, speaking to us. And there's a way in which, through the Bhagavad Gita, one may be enveloped by the Lord's presence just by reading the Bhagavad Gita. If we have that clarity about what the Gita is, and we take shelter of it every day, to have that experience, to feel that I'm satisfied by hearing by hearing the intelligent words of the Lord, and it fortifies me. This is real taste. This is taste. When you have this sense that Your mind tells you it's going to be boring. Has your mind ever told you chanting is boring? He's such a galoot that he'll come out the mind and just say stuff like that. This is boring. And when you get association with Vaishnavas, and you see, oh, it's not boring, this is actually the best thing, then when the boorish mind comes out and just makes these blatantly offensive and idiotic statements, then you have the wherewithal through your spiritually surcharged intelligence to say, no, I don't agree, because I've seen that it isn't boring, therefore I'll take shelter of Bhagavad Gita. And the moment that you do, you transfer yourself to the spiritual energy, and you're getting shelter there. And then you see for yourself, the evidence that this is God is because you feel it directly. You don't have to even know all the verses in the Bhagavad Gita. It's not an IQ test. It's a way of contacting Krishna directly. The hologram from the spiritual world appears in your very room while you're sitting there reading the Bhagavad Gita, and you think, oh my God, there's God. There's his intelligence. And as Prabhupada just mentioned here, it doesn't matter if it's just sound vibration or just a book. That's how absolute Krishna is. And if we get that experience regularly, then we'll always feel uplifted. And we'll know that's our go-to. Like we were talking this morning on our extensive japa walk. We stopped at a crossroads and just talking about the way in which if you fix your japa, you'll fix your life. Everyone's thinking, how do I fix my life? Go on YouTube. There's 50 million suggestions of how to do that. You just need better glutes or something. Whatever it may be. It's not going to do it. But if you fix your japa, you'll fix your life. And if you fix your mind on Bhagavad Gita, you won't have any more problems. You'll be able to figure everything out because it's the intelligence of God. And just as God was speaking directly to child Narada, he directly speaks to everybody. We just don't hear him because there's a lot of static. So if you take time to read Bhagavad Gita, the Vedic intelligence, the direct intelligence of Krishna, and feel enlivened that, oh, my mind tricked me and said it wasn't going to be nice, and now it is nice. And the more you can develop that asset, that I know better, I have a spiritual personality and intelligence that informs me that this hearing of Bhagavad Gita, chanting of good japa, it's way better than listening to the hooligan mind that just wants to fool around. That's all he wants to do, just fool around. 26. Questions?
Hare Krishna. Studying the Bhagavad Gita consistently is something that I've always struggled with, and I was wondering if you have advice as to how to scrutinize the study.
Well, don't study it, just read it. And try to be present. I read a quote earlier in the Yatra from a godbrother who was on his deathbed. And he said, don't read this for the knowledge, just read it for the experience that you feel direct connection. And you can redefine how you're approaching. I find that in many services, for instance, book distribution I mentioned before, there's a parallel here because devotees say, oh, it's so hard. And I say, don't make it hard, just have fun. Go out and make friends with people, and if a book goes out by accident, but don't even tell people about it. Just try to make friends with them, and if they say, hey, what do you got in your hand there? And you're like, nothing. No, really, tell me. Hey, listen, man, give me that book. Then you can sell a book. And if you go out with that idea, then you just have fun. And similarly, when you approach Bhagavad Gita or chanting, you can over-dramatize it in your mind that, oh, I have to become a Bhagavad Gita scholar. Just think, oh, Krishna, you're in this book, and Prabhupada, you're in this book. Let me just sit with you for a little while. And if you enter into it, just sneak in the door that way so you don't put so much pressure on yourself that you have to suddenly memorize everything you're looking at. Just be there. Think of every verse as a temple. And imagine when you walk in a temple, you're just going to show yourself to the deity. When you go for darshan, darshan doesn't mean you go to see the deity, it means you go to be seen by the deity. And you just walk in, that's why people go like this, they're going, I'm here, right? Did you get that? Is it on film? I'm here. And so if you show up for your chanting, just show up for Krishna and show up for the Bhagavad Gita, just like, I'm here, I'm at this verse, don't put too much pressure on yourself. Let Krishna manifest to you in the way he wants. Don't try so hard. That's part of what Narada's difficulty is here. Krishna revealed himself, that was Krishna's choice. Narada had the experience, and then Krishna withdrew just to teach him a lesson. And Narada was like, no, I'm going to get it back. I want it back, and I'm going to start breathing, and I'm going to chant my mantra the way I was taught to chant. And then Krishna, not like that. I appeared because I wanted to appear. And I'll appear again, but you have to go through the steps. And so, it's not mechanical. Prabhupada said that earlier. So don't do it mechanically, do it more from find another approach when you go in, and then it'll be noticeably sweet. Yes. Vrindavan, Natavar. Vrindavan, Natavar.
Hare Krishna. So I have a follow-up question to Hidayat Prabhu's question, which is that if someone were to ask us at what capacity are we in our service, at least speaking for myself, I might have two conflicting thoughts before answering. One thought of wanting to try and do as much as I can in this lifetime, be miserly, get as much service as I can, and another, the concern about burnout or exhaustion. So it seems like there has to be a lot of honest self-reflection before we answer a question like that. And do you have any advice on how we can practically examine ourselves and come to an honest conclusion about how engaged we really are?
Well, engage is one thing, and I am giving these metaphors about how we should have portfolio and so forth, but there are qualitative ways that are equally, if not more important, that we can measure where we are. After all, it's what Rupa Goswami describes, Nindai Shunya, there's a way in which he says, when you notice that you're not envious of other people, and you've lost that critical edge. And also, Krishna in the Gita in the 12th chapter, he talks about what pleases him in a devotee, and it's the way that we interact with others. The way we interact with other devotees and other living entities is an indication of how we interact with Krishna, because there is parts and parcels. And one of the ways we can judge how much we're advancing is how we're able to be respectful and humble and kind to others. And that's not just theoretical, it means the people you live with. Because oftentimes familiarity breeds contempt, and we also, in a society where there's an apparent hierarchy, we may start thinking, well, I'm higher on the pecking order, therefore I don't have to be nice to those underlings. After all, who do they think they are? But you'll notice advanced devotees who have they naturally have a humble heart. And it's obvious that they have deep respect for the consciousness within the bodies of others. They're not seeing the pecking order or the hierarchy, although that doesn't mean we dispatch with that a sense of interaction and don't have respect for elders and give mercy to those who are just coming up. But there's an abiding sense that we have a way of dealing with everybody in a kind and gentle manner. And if we're acerbic when we deal with people, if we're really nasty or condescending, it's a kind of a noticeable result of something in our consciousness that isn't purified yet. And of course we can practice being nice, but at some point it will come out. And so we can judge by it. For instance, Mukti Prasada, I said the other day, I don't know if I said it publicly, but who was it that asked about the ways you can judge? Yeah. So you had asked, what was your specific question? What are the symptoms? What are the main symptoms of somebody who's advancing in devotional service? Something like
Someone
that.
who has received the mercy of the Lord.
How can you judge who's received the mercy of the Lord? And I quoted from a commentary in the Bhagvatam, famous verse that Srila Puri had bestowed upon Nimai Pandita's disciple. Evam Vrata Swapriya Namakirtya Jatara Rago Jita Shuta Vichara Druta Chitta Vichara Asatito Rautiti Rotigariti Imanamat Nirtiti Lokavaya, which says that when you take a vow to chant Hare Krishna, Evam Vrata Vrata, take a vow to chant Hare Krishna. There's a way in which the result should be that your heart softens. Druta Chitta. Chitta means the heart, and Druta means the melt. And he says, then your countenance may change at certain intervals and you show ecstasy. Then, in the purport, the acharyas say not every person whose heart is melting shows external symptoms. But then Madhvacharya, it's a much commentated upon verse, he opines that there are only two symptoms by which you can judge the advancement of a devotee, including yourself. One is called steadiness. It means that you show up. There's a kind of, as I mentioned the other day, I consider Prabhupada showing up for his spiritual master's order to get on a boat at 70 and come to foreign country as being very rasika. I mean, it's an exhibition of this ecstasy within the heart that's a kind of exhibition of this ecstatic love in the heart that I'll get on a boat at 70 and I'll go to a foreign country just to teach Harinam Sankirtan. So steadiness is one. You're there because you can't fake steadiness, you either show up or you don't. And the other one is Mukti Prasada, which means that your speech is merciful and you're careful how you speak to people. And if you notice that when you're speaking to people, there's some jagged edges there, and not for the sake of improvement. I mean, some devotees, they may say something to you in a seemingly harsh way, but when you think about it afterwards, after your false ego calms down a little bit, you'll think, oh, I'm glad that this person chastised me because now I feel purified. It's always best to defer to, let the obviously more advanced devotees who are on a different level do that kind of thing for ourselves. It's usually a better idea to be discerning the way we speak to people. So that's the other part, is what's in here comes out here eventually. So you can tell, what did I just say to people and how did I say it? Was it merciful? Was it for their benefit? And if I have to give instruction, and I'm very careful to not offend their sense of themselves in the way that I give it. And those are two verifiable ways you can see if you're advancing, and you can also see it in others as well. Sometimes people would show up for a year and appear to be, oh wow, they're here for a whole year. Then 5 years, after 5 years and 1 month, it's like, what happened to them? They took a 30-year hiatus, or even 20 years, or 30 years. Once when in Australia, Prabhupada Charu Das was a new disciple, and Prabhupada was there availing himself to the devotees, and Charu, as a young devotee, asked Prabhupada, how long does it take in chanting to develop a sense of taste? And he said Prabhupada hesitated for about 60 seconds, and then he said 40 years. Just to give some scale. And so it's steadiness over a year, 5 years, whatever, then 10 years, 50 years, 40 years. Those, you can see a lifetime of dedicated service starts to add up, and that's a symptom of the things. Okay, I have till 20 after. Okay. Am I on text number 26?
Yes.
Thus I began chanting the holy name and fame of the Lord by repeated recitation, ignoring all the formalities of the material world. Such chanting and remembering of the transcendental pastimes of the Lord are benedictory. So doing, I traveled all over the earth, fully satisfied, humble, and unenvious. The life of a sincere devotee of the Lord is thus explained in a nutshell by our devotee by his personal example. Such a devotee, after his initiation by the Lord or his bona fide representative, takes very seriously chanting the glories of the Lord and traveling all over the world so that others may also hear the glories of the Lord. Such devotees have no desire for material gain. They are conducted by one single desire to go back to Godhead. This awaits them in due course on quitting the material body. Because they have the highest aim of life, going back to Godhead, they are never envious of anyone, nor are they proud of being eligible to go back to Godhead. Their only business is to chant and remember the holy name, fame, and pastimes of the Lord, and according to personal capacity, to distribute the message for others' welfare without motive of material gain. Isn't that an encouraging purport?
Yes.
That's so perfectly pure Prabhupada. Yes.
I had a quick request that you could elaborate on one point.
Yeah.
We see that among our previous acharyas, the desire to go back to Godhead or any desire for liberation is completely rejected, and that only the desire for bhakti remains. Could you please elaborate on what you're talking about, the devotee desiring to go back to Godhead?
Krishna, if Krishna wants us to go back to Godhead, then that's the devotee's prerogative also. And there's a way in which idea about what my rasa is and so forth. Well, I don't want to be a common boy. I wanted to be a Madhurya rasa. This is not such an issue for devotees who are fully engaged in service to the Lord. My godbrother just passed away. I remember once an interaction with one of Prabhupada's godbrothers that I knew, Puri Maharaj. It was a godbrother who was extremely austere. He was Babaji. He lived in Radhakund. And he was so skinny because he barely ate anything. And once he was sitting there in this very senior Vaishnava song, and he said, "What are you doing? You know, all these austerities." And he said to him, just chant Hare Krishna. When Krishna wants you, he'll come and get you. And so there's a sense devotees have, whatever Krishna wants from you. And in the Bhagavatam Sindhu, it's described how when Krishna wants you to serve in a certain way, he puts it into your mind and heart that I want to serve Krishna in a certain way. And the devotee's awakening to that very particular desire for a specific kind of service is really coming from Krishna. But the devotee feels simultaneously that this is my desire. And when it comes like that, if Krishna wants you to go in a certain direction and to a certain place to serve him, then that's the impetus a devotee has as a pure devotee. And of course there's different levels of pure devotees. As Prabhupada describes and as is accounted for in the Srimad Bhagvatam, the second canto. When devotees go back to Godhead, Prabhupada says, some like to see the material world on their way out. They take the scenic route. And they want to see where they were. Like, what was this whole thing anyway? They have some curiosity. And others just say, yeah, just straight back, I don't want to see the thing. I'm done with it. And so there's nuance. It's not stereotypical. Every living entity is unique and has a unique relationship with the Lord in various circumstances. But in the essence of your question is that when the devotee wants to serve Krishna, Krishna says, serve in this way. Like he told Dhruva after Dhruva said, I don't want anything, I just want to serve. And Krishna said, no, you stay here and be a king. And he didn't argue with that because it was the Lord's desire. He felt as much connected with Krishna from doing that as anything else. Does that help?
Yes, Mark. So the desire to go in this context is simply a desire just to fulfill a service that Krishna himself has bestowed upon us.
Yeah. And the Prabhupada said, when he asked us to pray for him, he said, he had a structure of the prayer. My Lord, if you so desire, please help our spiritual master be healthy so that we can have his association. Thank you for considering our request. And Krishna has makes his own decision, and Prabhupada was clear about that also. He said, well, if Krishna wants me to stay, I'll stay. If he wants me to leave, I'll leave. And if he wants to take one back to Godhead. Of course, devotees may have their own independent idea about how they want to serve Krishna. Here in Māyāpur, for instance, I told you earlier, Prabhupada used to tell us all we had to come here. He wanted us all to come so we could be together and all chant together and have this association. So most of the movement came here for these festivals we had with Prabhupada here in Vrindavan. But I remember Rohini Sutta and Manidhar, they didn't come one year. Prabhupada said, where are they? And he said, they wanted to stay and distribute books. And Prabhupada said, oh, that was very nice. So he was pleased with the devotees who came. He was pleased with the devotees who decided they wanted to stay. And yeah, it's not some chalked out system, as I use the word stereotypical. Everyone has a unique kind of relationship with Krishna. And pure devotional service means that you just want to serve Krishna. And you may even have, Krishna may say, I want you to do this, and some devotee may then request Krishna, could I do it a little more like that, to please you. And sometimes devotees have a slight argument with Krishna about how they're situated, how they want to serve. So it's very personal. I mean, look at Sanatana Goswami. He had conversations with his deity. The deity said, you got any salt for these? Like, listen. Started asking for condiments, and there's no anything. Mango pickle. Anyway, we're on a track here with this story. I don't know when we have time. I hope we have time before we leave to finish it. But we're done for today because we're stopping slightly early so we can leave early. And it's a very important section of the Bhagavatam to remember about the path Narada Muni was on, and we can relate it to our own life. And there's so many points here to gather up, try to collect them, and then just apply them. Jai Prabhupada, Jai Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Shri Panchatattva, Shri Radha Mohan, Shri Narada Muni, Shri Vyasadeva. If you so desire, please enlighten our hearts with a desire to follow in the footsteps of the great acharyas, and to be steady in our devotional service, and to be kind friend to all living beings. Thank you for considering our request. Om Tat Sat. Everyone agrees with this prayer in whole or in part. Please unmute and say Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. And now we have a word from our sponsor.
Just a very quick announcement, everyone. Today is the last opportunity for the laundry, if you want to give, because we'll be back tomorrow. Because some of you may be leaving early at least, but those who are leaving a little bit later, of course, you will have the opportunity to give the laundry tomorrow. And if you can all assemble down for 9:10 to leave, start assembling from 9:05, and by 9:10 we would like to leave on the e-rickshaws will be outside ready for us to take us to the gate number 11, and then we'll board boat to Lovely. So this one is mentioned. I had a question, Maran, but I'll save it for tomorrow morning class.
Okay. You have a class tomorrow morning?
Well, I was thinking tomorrow morning we can, we just doing the morning
Go to Mangwartik.
and then come back after the puja, so we can still have 7:30 to 8:30 session. Right?
We'll go to Mangwartik, then you come back.
That's what I was hoping we could do.
Yeah.
Yeah, after Mangalati we can come back and do the Guru Puja here. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
They asked me to lead Mangwartik, so I may need a little help.
Haribol!
Usually the least crowded place is around where the person's leaving anyway, so you can give them your press pass. I don't know how crowded it's going to be, but it usually is. Yeah?
Madhumadav altar has been extremely crowded the last 4 days, but Panchitapa is it's pretty easy to get to the front in Panchitapa side.
Launch call to Vishal. Have a nice breakfast. We'll see you on the night.
Haribol!